Welcome to the Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's Big Story is in a move that caught many by surprise. President Marcos names a new president and CEO for PhilHealth, replacing Emmanuel Ledesma Jr. This while the Supreme Court hears oral arguments on the transfer of nearly 90 billion pesos out of the insurer.
At least 37 bloggers snub the first House hearing on fake news and disinformation today, angering some of the lawmakers. In fact, some of the social media influencers run to the Supreme Court to get a TRO.
And on the second day of the food security emergency, the Agriculture Department slashes the maximum suggested retail price of imported rice by 3 more pesos.
Change is afoot at PhilHealth's. President Marcos appointed a new president and CEO, U.S.-trained Dr. Edwin Mercado.
In fact, the president swore in Dr. Mercado right this afternoon. No statement yet, though, from his predecessor, Emmanuel Ledesma Jr., about his sudden departure.
But of course, Ledesma's leadership has been mired in controversies, and one such issue was the transfer of PhilHealth's so-called excess funds back to the National Treasury, the oral arguments for which the Supreme Court began hearing today. Maricel Halili has tonight's Big Story.
PhilHealth is hoping for a new lease on life with a new man at the helm. U.S.-trained orthopedic surgeon Dr. Edwin Mercado has replaced Emmanuel Ledesma Jr. as president and CEO of the state health insurer in what came as a surprise to many. Dr. Mercado took his oath of office on Tuesday, bringing with him decades of experience as hospital administrator, among others. He's a medicine graduate of the University of the Philippines, former vice chairman of Mercado General Hospital and QualiMed Health Network, has a Master of Medical Sciences and Global Health Delivery from Harvard Medical School, and an executive master's degree in healthcare administration from the University of North Carolina. In a statement, PhilHealth welcomed its new chief, expressing confidence that Mercado will successfully carry out the mandate of the National Health Insurance Program and fulfill the aspirations of universal health care for all 115 million Filipinos. For his part, Health Secretary Ted Herbosa says he's excited to work with a new PhilHealth president. He also thanked Ledesma for his service, even though he slammed PhilHealth management just last month over its quote-unquote broken system. Public health advocate Dr. Mingita Padilla says the medical community is happy about Mercado's appointment as he's a good man, but pointed out that he has his work cut out for him.
We in the medical field we actually welcome the appointment of Dr. Ed Mercado as PhilHealth CEO, President and CEO. They have to clean up the execom. I'm really sorry. There has to be some accountability, and that's the difficult part, and it needs courage and political will, not just on the part of the new president, but also on the part of the appointing authority. Now they have to back him up, because I believe that Ed is a good guy, and he's competent, and he wants to do what's good, and he doesn't need this job. I think he's doing it to serve.
Ledesma has yet to speak out about being replaced, but his tenure since November 2022 was hounded by numerous controversies, including a Medusa ransomware attack, where the data of millions of PhilHealth members were supposedly compromised. Then there's the 138 million peso proposed budget for the state health insurer's 30th anniversary celebration this year. And this year, PhilHealth got 0 government subsidy, a first since the agency's inception. Senate President Cheese Escudero now says openly that Ledesma should have been replaced a long time ago. He also has this advice to Ledesma's successor.
Huwag niyang gawin yung ginawa ng kanyang predecessor. Tutukan ng benepisyo na dapat binibigay sa ating mga kababayan at tiyakin na match ito sa pangailangan.
Senate Finance Committee Chair Grace Poe hopes Mercado can take on what she calls the gargantuan task of making PhilHealth shape up and live up to its mandate. She also tells the new management to settle remaining deficiencies to health workers, hospitals, and other institutions. And on the day there was a leadership change at PhilHealth, The agency was also the subject of oral arguments over at the Supreme Court not too far away. Taken up were 3 petitions that branded as illegal the Department of Finance's order to have PhilHealth transfer almost 90 billion pesos of its budget to the National Treasury to be used for unprogrammed appropriations. Outside the High Court, Health Alliance for Democracy, Filipino Nurses United, and Bayan Muna also protested the budget return. Petitioners included former Finance Undersecretary Magno, Senator Coco Pimentel, former SC Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, and the Philippine Medical Association. The Solicitor General is serving as legal counsel through the respondents, PhilHealth, the Executive Secretary, Department of Finance, and both houses of Congress. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
The Finance Department put out a statement today in response to the case. Well, let me read that out, including the most salient points regarding how they came up with the 89.9 billion peso figure. Well, it said an extensive review of the financial statements of all GOCCs was conducted and revealed that PhilHealth had accumulated a substantial sum of excess, unused, and idle funds over the past few years, amounting to 183.1 billion. However, the DOF exercised a prudent and moral decision to limit the return to the excess, idle, and unused government subsidies from 2021 to 2023, thus arriving at 89.9 billion.
It goes on to say that mobilizing PhilHealth's excess funds will not in any way hamper its ability to provide quality services to its members. In fact, it remains in a strong financial position, which has enabled it to expand its benefit packages last year. PhilHealth's total assets amount to 598 billion as of end September 2024. To recall, the money was transferred out of PhilHealth in tranches last year, 20 billion pesos in May, 10 billion in August, and 30 billion in October. The final batch, which was 29.9 billion, was supposed to be remitted back to the Treasury on November 11, but the TRO from the Supreme Court stopped it. That's after at least 3 petitions were filed questioning the constitutionality of the fund transfers.
All right, at this point, let's bring in former Finance Undersecretary Magno. She is one of the petitioners against what some have called the impounding of PhilHealth's funds, and I believe she joins us on the line. Good evening, Yusek Magno, Professor Magno, I should call you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hi, good evening. I can hear you.
Perfect. Prof, first of all, I wonder if you could give us an update on how the oral arguments today at the Supreme Court went. Were you able to attend, and how was your assessment?
Yes, I was able to attend, and based on my assessment and what I heard from the government side is that, the clear argument from their side is that they're saying they're the PhilHealth fund on the basis of creativity and innovativeness in terms of fiscal management. And I surmise that there's no strong legal foundation or basis on the action of Department of Finance.
And yet the DOF today issued a statement, Professor. It's a very long statement, parts of which essentially they're arguing that it was legally sound. They consulted the Office of the Solicitor General before they proceeded with the transfer. They also consulted the GOCCs, and in the end they said they exercised prudent and moral decision in coming up with that 89.9 billion pesos. How do we reconcile that viewpoint?
Well, the key question that was asked by the members of the Supreme Court today is how we define the surplus fund. And based on the government's explanation, it clearly showed that there's no legal basis on the definition of surplus fund that they presented. And even when I look at this surplus fund that the DOF is referring to, if you look at it, it's basically the difference between what government provided, the subsidy to indirect contributors, minus what they actually spent for indirect contributors. This is a basic violation, or it contradicts some basic foundation of insurance on risk pooling. So for me, there's no legal basis. There's no basis on basic insurance principles. So That's my assessment of what I saw today
Like we
from the
know.
presentation of the government.
All right, Professor Shello, we know that the DOF did say have a long statement and they tried to explain. I was wondering if their reasoning or their explanations was satisfactory to you, and also they again re-emphasized that they were just following the directives of Congress, that fourth provision that you were talking about in your podcasts when sa kasagsagan nitong issue, right?
Right. Well, the discussion today centered on our Section 11 of the Universal Health Care Act, where it was very clear that the PhilHealth can have a reserve fund, and any amount in excess of the reserve fund can only be used to improve the benefits of the members or adjust the premium of the members. And so the justices were asking what the basis is of the computation of the surplus, because the law does not provide for provision or for any surplus fund. And that was not answered clearly by the Department of Finance. So I don't know where their argument that they have a legal basis is coming from, but that was clearly what emerged in the discussion in the court today.
Professor, yung surplus funds, pareho ba yan sa reserve fund? Kasi PhilHealth is required to have
No.
iba pa yun.
Yes. So what they're saying is that on top of the reserve fund, they have a surplus fund. And the reserve fund is actually designed to cover the contingent liability of PhilHealth. These are anticipated expenses that PhilHealth should be able to cover in the event that these expenses are realized. So what the Department of Finance is saying is after computing the reserve fund, they're able to compute for surplus funds, which on that basis, they collected and transferred to the Treasury.
Okay,
So the key question is there legal basis to have a surplus fund? And unfortunately, there's no such thing in the law, because what the law says is that if you have excess money on top of the reserve fund, the only option for government is to adjust the benefits or refund, reduce the premium that the members are paying.
Okay, but do you think it's a conflict of definition? I mean, we're here trying to flesh out what's surplus, what's reserve, how much insurance contract liabilities should be kept by PhilHealth. But when we talk to DOH, sabi nila that we're trying to make PhilHealth more efficient in its use of money because it's supposed to be improving on its packages. And we saw that lately. They improved on almost all of their programs. So it makes us wonder if this pressure on PhilHealth actually made them do their job better.
Yes, I'm actually happy that they're now adjusting all the packages. But there are a lot of questions that are emerging on the way they presented the information. For example, there was a question on how they're computing the reserve fund. And they said that they are basing this on past operational costs of PhilHealth. If you are aware of how actuarial projections are made, this cannot be based on historical, you base it on historical data, but assuming future expenses. So you have to make adjustments based on anticipated expenses, not based on historical costs. That's one. And then second, I think the issue of accountability is also something important, because in the first place, aside from the management's responsibility of making sure that they improve the services of PhilHealth, the board of PhilHealth, which includes the Secretary of Finance, Secretary of Budget, the Secretary of Health, have a moral responsibility to make sure that PhilHealth does its job of providing Filipinos sufficient packages to cover our health expenditures. But unfortunately, what emerged, and based on the presentation of the government, is that over the years, there's this surplus fund, while we Filipinos are only benefiting a small coverage from PhilHealth. So it means that there's significant inefficiency in PhilHealth, and the surplus fund that they are presenting is based on this inefficiency. And I would attribute this inefficiency to the inability of the management to improve its services, and for the board to not demanding accountability from the management.
There are a lot of words here whose definition are being argued at this point. So you talked about surplus, you talked about reserve funds. Let me introduce a few others. The DOF used the words excess, unused, and idle funds to describe the 183.1 billion pesos that they said PhilHealth had, which is what they based the 89.9 billion pesos on to begin with. They said they realized that PhilHealth had accumulated this amount over the years. Let me zero in on the word unused there. What is the issue here with the fact that that amount was unused, if it was indeed 183 billion pesos?
That's actually what's bothering me, because in the first place, for example, if you have a reserve fund, you should not really use it because it has to be a ready fund that the PhilHealth can use to cover its liability. On the other hand, based on the Section 11, if they do it on top of, well, refunding or reducing premium and expanding services, PhilHealth can also have an investment fund. So if it's idle, are they saying that they did not invest the money? So these are the emerging questions, and I think it's good that they're being put on the table. But an important thing would be to hold the management and the board of PhilHealth accountable for the failure to properly manage the finances of PhilHealth and for the failure to expand the services that we should getting from them.
As far as you know, Professor Shello, supposedly this idea to transfer the idle slash excess slash unused surplus reserve fund was cleared by the COA as well as the GOCCCGC, I believe it's called, the Corporate Governance Commission governing GOCCs. Is it because there has been no precedent, or like what went on there?
Well, if you look at the COA report, they're highlighting that PhilHealth is financially unhealthy because they do not have sufficient funds to cover their contingent liability. So I'm not sure COA is agreeing to the transfer of funds to the Treasury. The OGCC, I would assume, because you have said they consulted the OGCC, and that they're arguing that their action was based on the provision of the GAA. So I would assume that in the succeeding discussion in the Supreme Court, that will be further threshed out.
Okay. Prof, a new PhilHealth CEO, was introduced today. That's Dr. Edwin Mercado. I want to get your reaction to that. And what would be your challenge to the new head of the state insurer?
Yeah, well, that's a welcome move because we've been calling for the removal of the president of PhilHealth. But in fact, not just the president, but the whole management of PhilHealth needs a revamp. But I would, my primary concern is really making sure that they expand the benefit of PhilHealth, benefit coverage, but at the same time, to also make sure that there are providers. Because, for example, PhilHealth keeps on saying that we have this consulta package and that everyone is covered. But despite the fact that this package exists, it's not really available to everyone because there are no providers where we can use the services. So providing the supplier is also important in terms of making sure that PhilHealth is effective. So that's one. And then second, I would like to actually challenge in relation to the absence of budget for 2025, because that's another legal question that we haven't really discussed, right? And we are planning to file a case against this. I would actually want to challenge the government. If it is true that there's excess money that's not being used, and if the government is not providing its counterpart in terms of the premium of indirect payers, then I would challenge the president to also issue a moratorium in terms of premium payments of regular workers. Because if the government is not paying its premium, why would regular, ordinary Filipino pay its premium when they are saying there are excess funds? So let's utilize the money. Let's use all this quote-unquote idle funds to finance PhilHealth and resume the payment when the government decides to provide its counterpart also.
I want to get ahead of the Supreme Court here, Professor, but I wonder if I could hear your expert insights. Who do you think has a bigger liability here? The DOF for interpreting the funds, the financial statements of PhilHealth as such, or as Shawn pointed out, it was Congress who ordered that the so-called excess funds of the 2024 GAA be remitted to finance unprogrammed appropriations.
I think both branches of government have accountability here. One, Congress for going beyond its mandate in terms of framing the GAA and trying to amend existing laws by allowing the executive to tap GOCC money. But on the other hand, DOF for also being a member of the board and not pushing PhilHealth to do its job of providing better services and better coverage for Filipino people. And instead of doing that, actually trying to get the money to use it to cover for infrastructure projects that are actually unfunded, which is actually the root cause of all these problems.
Yeah, like just to go a bit off topic, that was weird because in this year's budget, they removed the counterpart funding to those big infra projects. So I'm just like, what the heck happened there? But in any case, Professor Shallow, would you know like what happened to the 60 billion that was already remitted before the TRO came out? Do we know whether or not it really did go to where they said it would be going, which is to pay for the back pay of the healthcare workers from the COVID pandemic, et cetera, et cetera? Basically, it was a lot of it also went to those mga utang, no, in terms of medically related things.
Well, I think I saw some documents showing that the 60 billion was used to finance some of those unprogrammed appropriations, including infrastructure, based on a pronouncement of the Department of Finance. But nevertheless, depending on how the case in the court goes, we are hoping that the courts would require DOF to return the money to PhilHealth to make sure that PhilHealth is able to finance its function.
Is that even really possible, though, Professor Shella, for the money to be returned?
Yes. If the court decides that the DOF has to return the money, then DOF has to return the money.
I want to get some clarity.
Especially if we're able to present an argument that not returning the money will put PhilHealth in a very bad financial position. And if you look at the COA assessment of the financial position of PhilHealth, it clearly shows that PhilHealth is in a negative equity position currently. So it means that it doesn't have sufficient fund for contingent liability. And listening to how they presented their data this afternoon, they're saying that PhilHealth has 280-something reserve fund, when in reality, PhilHealth should have reserve fund equivalent to 2 years of forecasted expenditure, not historical expenditure, but forecasted expenditure. If you look at the mandate of PhilHealth and how much they should be spending, for example, consulta package alone is 1,700 per head, multiplied by the total population of Filipino, then that should be at least around 193 billion already. So there's something wrong with the way they're computing contingent liability and reserve fund.
I actually wanted to talk about that because we had DOH on the show and they were saying that PhilHealth should not operate like a life insurance provider. It should operate like an HMO or health insurance provider, that it should keep a certain amount of money for the year. And kung para siyang basket na kumbaga mag-ambagan tayo para pag may nagkasakit, sagot natin yon. And then the next year, if somebody else gets sick, yung pera naman ng ibang pupunta sa kanya. Pero hindi siya yung buong buhay hanggang sa mamatay, you have to hold on to the money. So they were saying that PhilHealth should keep a smaller, baka mali yung yung computation nung insurance liability. Parang
well, they have to have a reserve fund. The way they compute the reserve fund has to be reviewed kasi hindi naman pwedeng you utilize all the money. Kasi you have to make sure that you have extra funds to cover unanticipated expenditure. Kasi yung forecasted expenditure naman is based on predicted costs, but you cannot really take into account all the possible costs that a country will incur in terms of healthcare. So that, I think kanina then there was recognition that there's insufficient capacity in terms of actuarial skills in PhilHealth So I think it's good that we're not only talking about the legal framework, but also the technical capacity of PhilHealth as an institution.
Earlier, no, sila Regina in Storycon were able to interview Dr. Mingita Padilla. She was making a suggestion to remove the execom because she said, these are the people that are really working behind the scenes and boots on the ground with the policies and all of that. And actually, the president is, kasi, last admin, we had a bunch of different PhilHealth chiefs. What are your thoughts on that? Are you on the same page? I know she was also one of the petitioners or part of the group.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have a review of the organization of PhilHealth and the people who are working in PhilHealth, because I don't think you can just parachute one person and expect that person to really fix all the problems of PhilHealth. Clearly, the problems of PhilHealth is bigger than just having an incompetent president. So it's very important to have an organizational review of PhilHealth.
Right. Professor, if I could just shift gears now and talk about the rallies from Friday, because we haven't had a chance to talk to you about it. Related din naman because we're talking about budget issues. Your groups were protesting the 2025 budget as well. You said it was a reflection ng matinding corruption. Also, the second issue being calling for the impeachment of the Vice President. What was your assessment of how those rallies turned out and what's next for the group?
No, for me it was a success because a lot of people came, most of them unaligned, expressing the same sentiment regarding the budget and of course the call to impeach VP Sara, actually not just impeach, but to take action for the current administration to take action against the corrupt practices of the Vice President and her father, and also the crimes that he has committed. So that's it. I actually want to take opportunity also to clarify some things because there were reports in the media of individuals attending na binayaran daw and all.
Yes.
And that was quite disappointing for me because those pictures that were shown or the videos or the individuals that were shown were not from our protest rally in the afternoon. So I was a bit disappointed dun sa mga reporters for not clarifying which rally those individuals participated. So we have a statement from the citizens and clergy for good governance that we are very sure that those participants were not from our rally in the afternoon.
So as far as you know, nobody was paid and nobody was planted kasi that was the other accusation, may mga plinant daw.
Well, actually, yung planted, meron kami. Kasi I remember some of the participants approaching me and they said that they saw it and sinita talaga nila. And nung sinita nila, biglang umalis. And they were giving money to our participants. And the participants said hindi nila kilala itong taong bigla na lang sila binibigyan ng money. And nung sinita nga ng mga ibang participants, biglang umalis. So they reported it to me. So in our event, it actually happened. But those individuals who appeared in the video, clearly, they were not participants of our event.
Ano po yung panawagan in the event na walang magyari sa impeachment before Thursday because or at least by Thursday
2 days
because
left
2 days
before
left.
Congress goes on recess.
Meron bang isa pang call or plano na mag-rally in case that doesn't pan out?
Well, we will continue our demands for this administration to actually hold the Vice President accountable kasi enumerate naman na yung mga basis for filing of cases against her and for impeaching her. So I don't think we will stop from stating this demand.
Professor,
Sorry, Prof.
go ahead.
Any thoughts on Vice President Sara Duterte saying she's now seriously considering running for president 2028?
Well, anyone can decide to run in 2028. So parang hindi naman siya surprising on my part na magkaroon siya ng ganung decision.
Fair point.
Hey, Professor, the Supreme Court is asking government to explain itself in the challenge of the constitutionality of the budget. At this point, what do you think can happen? If this budget is actually declared unconstitutional, we have an election year coming up. We have a special budget for that. Will we get a reenacted budget? And, wouldn't that end up in a crisis of some sort?
Well, if the Supreme Court, we're also planning to file our a case against the 2025 budget, maybe in a week or two. But in the event that the Supreme Court declares the 2025 budget unconstitutional, then Congress can easily convene themselves and amend the current budget to correct the problem. So in the meantime, kapag na-declare yun and Congress has not convened itself, then we will have the reenacted budget. But Congress always has that opportunity to amend the 2025 budget and to correct it so that we can avoid the situation of a completely reenacted budget for 2025.
That's right. We're going to have to keep monitoring that then for now. Have to leave this conversation for now. Thank you so much for your insights tonight. That was former Finance Undersecretary Professor Cielo Magno.
Still to come, content creators were a no-show in today's House hearing on disinformation online. The details when the big story returns. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Dozens of social media personalities who were invited to the lower house snubbed the hearing on fake news today. Instead, some of them ran to the Supreme Court to argue that the hearing violated their right to freedom of speech. Marian Enriquez with a big story.
Of the 40 social media personalities invited to the House investigation on the proliferation of fake news and disinformation, only 3 showed up. Most submitted excuse letters, with some saying they were out of the country. Others questioned the legitimacy of the House probe, invoking their freedom of speech. This did not sit well with Committee on Human Rights Chairman and Manila 6th District Representative Benny Abante.
Ang tatapang nila eh. Ang tatapang sa pagmumura, ha? Nang wala tayong kalaban-laban. Ngayon, pag kaharap dito, hindi makaharap dito. Oo. Eh, mga takot din pala yung mga yan eh. Humarap ka dito. Dito.
Abang Lingkod Party List Representative Stephen Paduan said the letters were not a free pass. He then made a motion to issue show-cause orders to the content creators who did not state a valid reason for their absence. Among them were former Press Secretary Attorney Trixie Cruz Angeles, Mark Anthony Lopez, Crisette Loretta Chu, Aaron Peña, and Elizabeth Joey Cruz. Attorney Cruz Angeles, who outright rejected the committee's invitation, filed a temporary restraining order on the hearing before the Supreme Court on behalf of the group.
Ito ay paraan para malimit yung space o yung democratic space para makapagsalita at makapagpahayag. So mahalaga na dalhin namin sa tamang venue at ang venue na ito ay ang Korte Suprema.
In a statement, Attorney Harry Roque said he was serving as legal counsel to the group and insisted that the House investigation is meant to take down the Dutertes and their allies. Roque himself has skipped House inquiries and remains at large with an outstanding arrest warrant and detention order from the Quad Committee in his name. Roque also called the lower chamber a kangaroo court, claiming that his clients have already been prejudged in the privileged speech of Surigao del Norte Representative Ace Barbers. The former presidential spokesperson added there is no other remedy but to find relief with the Supreme Court. But Barber stressed that the investigation is not about curtailing freedom of speech.
Wala hong curtailment o suppression ng freedom of speech dito. Kaya nga kayo inimbita rito eh. Diba? Kaya kayo inimbita dito para makapagpahayag din kayo.
Paduano also moved to refer Cruz Angeles' case to the House Legal Department for a possible disbarment case. Despite being snubbed by most of those invited, the TRICOM continued the hearing, where a proposed code of conduct for content creators was discussed. Veteran journal Ellen Tordesillas of Verifiles highlighted the importance of having ethical standards on social media.
I'm worried sometimes that we take the lack of truthfulness parang casually for granted. So I think we should, yun ang pinakaano ko is, I think we should strengthen our appreciation for truthfulness. Merong mga journalists na nagbablog, di ba? But blogging does not make you a journalist.
For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
In other news, it is day 2 of the food security emergency on rice, and the Department of Agriculture says that it will cut prices of imported rice as well. The plan is to reduce the suggested retail price of imported rice to 55 pesos a kilo starting tomorrow, February 5. The MSRP was previously pegged at 58 pesos per kilo. Moreover, Agriculture Secretary Kiko Tiu Laurel says they will keep working to reduce prices on imported rice in the coming weeks so that it may possibly fall below 50 pesos per kilo by early March. Those levels, he said, are better reflective of world market prices and the reduced tariffs from last year. As for the NFA rice, the DA says they will start distributing in the NCR first, since this is the region that registered the extraordinary price increases.
Sa susunod na araw ay masimulan na maglabas ang NFA. Paunang tinatarget yung kalahati ng stocks niya na 300,000 metric tons. So ang ilalabas ay 150,000 metric tons muna. Pangunahin, Cheryl, dito sa National Capital Region dahil dito mataas na-record yung extraordinary increase sa presyo ng beef. Tinitingnan dito. So ang Region 7, outside of Metro Manila, ay tinitingnan natin yung mga key metro areas din na naging mataas yung presyo ng mga nakalipas na buwan. Ito ay well-milled rice na bigas natin, 25% broken. At 0 to 3 months yung stocks ng NFA na ilalabas. We are hoping na mapababa niya yung presyo sa merkado.
But the Federation of Free Farmers is still urging the DA to reconsider its food security emergency, saying farmers will be forced to sell palay for less to compete, which means they either just break even or even lose money. The FFF wants the DA to go after the importers and wholesalers instead.
Kung 35 yung selling at retail, so the equivalent palay price will be about 17 to 18 pesos per kilo. Sa ganung presyo, baka kalahati ng magsasaka malulugi na. And kalahati, konti na lang yung kikitain. Kung makita ko na ang kalabang ko ay NFA rice na magandang klase, binibenta at 35. Mapipilitan akong ibaba yung bili ko ng palay para makapaglaban ako sa NFA rice. No?
Speaking of tariffs, President Donald Trump has agreed to hold off imposing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for 30 days in yet another flip-flop. That's after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum got on a last-minute call with Trump, with all three striking deals for a postponement. Trudeau said Canada would deploy personnel to stop the flow of fentanyl along its border with the U.S., while Mexico vowed to have more of its National Guard on station against illegal migration, drug and weapons trafficking. The agreement has seemingly saved the North American neighbors from the brink of a damaging trade war, at least for now. China, however, was not part of the A 10% tariff on Chinese imports is now in effect after the deadline passed, and in retaliation, Beijing imposed a 15% tariff on coal and LNG from the U.S., as well as 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and other automotive parts. Trump is set to speak with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week.
I have discussed is we'll have some good meetings with China. We have meetings planned, and we'll see what happens. But that was just an opening salvo. If we can't make a deal with China, then the tariffs will be very, very substantial.
So who bent the knee here? It seems to be. I saw post Trudeau bent the knee or Trump. Like
Ronald Llamas calls this the flip the table strategy, meaning I'll come to the negotiating table, I'll flip the table over, disrupt everything, and then let's talk again, right? As opposed to the more diplomatic way of coming at the negotiating table. Everyone's nice, everyone's trying to not hurt each other's feelings. Ito, okay.
It seems to have worked really fast, at least for now.
Threaten each other first, and then once you're done with that, let's talk.
Problema lang pala sa drugs in the borders.
It's a really big problem.
What will happen now with China, though?
I think that's a completely different story.
That.
I guess we'll find out. But we have to pause for a very quick break. Still to come, use of fake PWD IDs for discounts. We have Resto PH's Eric Tang to talk to us about this after this break. Keep it here. All right, welcome back to the big story here on One News.
The misuse of IDs for discounts is now a huge concern for the food serving and restaurant industry. Restaurant owners of the Philippines recently posted on social media calling out the widespread abuse of fake PWD IDs that are, quote, crippling the restaurant industry. Resto PH explained that the 20% discount mandated by law is not subsidized by the government, but is shouldered by the businesses themselves, thereby impacting employees, the food quality, and the menu prices. The issue could spell the difference between survival and closure, especially for smaller establishments, they said. The statement ends with a call for fairness, stressing the discount should help those it was meant for.
Let's discuss this issue with restaurant owners of the Philippines, President Emeritus Eric Tang. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hello, good evening.
Okay, Eric, can you give us an overview of the gravity of the situation? Like, how much do businesses lose from fake PWD IDs? And I guess, what triggered the discovery of that so many are actually using fake PWD IDs? How did you figure that out?
Well, we've been seeing, first, thank you for having us. We've been seeing fake PWD cards since before the pandemic, but until the formation of Resto PH, none of us got together and talked about our common experiences. And before, it was just a few per day. 2 years ago, we noticed that the PWD discounts were now accounting for 5% of our sales. And recently, late last year, when we held another discussion, it was over 25%, and with some restaurants reporting 30%. Wow. So clearly, it has gone up by 5-fold. So this is significant because it now will force restaurants to raise prices or let go of people. Price should be the real persons with disability.
Oh dear.
Who have been raised just to cover discount expenses.
Eric, just to set the context as well, can you tell us how many restaurant owners Resto PH represents? How big an industry group are you?
We are over 200 owners, but that represents a few thousand restaurants in the country. And we also try to help other restaurant associations in other parts of the country, other cities, or other provinces and other regions. So we see ourselves as a group who are only trying to be of service to the restaurant and F&B industry.
Eric, I'm just curious, like, what have you guys done? I know you have a group, so you obviously probably meet and talk about this particular gripe for a while now. Were there any concrete action plans that you guys decided on? Who do you call when you have these problems? And were you guys heard at all?
Oh, yes. We've been having dialogues with our mayors. We've had dialogues with former Secretary Abalos of the ILG. And recently we had a hearing with Senator Gatchalian and Secretary Rex Gatchalian of the DSWD. And we're very happy that Senator Gatchalian has seen the massive losses in tax revenues. Right. By his estimates, it was over 88 billion pesos. And by their estimates also, potentially up to 8 million fake PWD cards are in circulation. The population of persons with disability in the Philippines is actually less than 2 million. So that's it's easy for us to now believe our own assessment that more than half of the cards we see being presented at our restaurants are actually fake.
Eric, when you say it is a fake PWD ID, do you mean to say that these are IDs not issued by government, by LGUs? kumbaga pinagawa lang ba to sa recto? Ganong fake?
Wala niya.
Sabi kasi ni Senator Gatchalian, nababenta daw online, 1,500 to 2,000
or is it
pesos.
fake declaration of disability?
Right. It's legitimate
Like, totoo yung
PWD ID card, but they don't really have
They're not
disability.
sick. Or they don't have a disability.
Uh,
Or both.
Actually,
Okay, let's wait for
he's,
Eric
the
to...
lower.
Oh, there we go. Eric, can you say that again? You kind of froze. It's a bit choppy.
Okay, my apologies. Recently, we have seen fake cards being sold on Facebook Marketplace for as little as 150 pesos. Probably that's a very bad fake. Normally, they're selling for about, I think, 300 pesos up to 1,500 with the booklet. But actually, the danger is it can actually be printed by anyone at home with a printer. And the problem here is that it's so prevalent that they're getting better at making these fakes. Before, it was easy to spot, and I don't want to share all our trade secrets how we spot.
We won't ask you to.
Cards. But we do see a lot of inconsistencies. The most usual is the serial numbers of several people for their card are identical. Or some will have, we are presented with templates or samples of, let's say, cities like Quezon City, Manila, and they have very different designs. So sometimes the Metro Manila or Manila design card is being used to know a city. So it's very easy to spot. Or the LGU code is not the one that it.
2 days ago, Eric, the DOJ said... Sorry, are you there? Can you still hear us? Hi, Eric.
Yes, I can.
Yes. Okay, 2 days ago, the DOJ said no need to verify with the second ID. No, when PWDs are using their cards. How has this impacted you guys? We also know that they did release like some sort of a new PWD card. Have those helped at all, or it's early days yet?
The DOJ, we agree with what the DOJ has expressed in their opinion, that there should be no need for verification. And we would like not to verify the card. We want, like senior citizens card, we don't verify at all because, for example, one look at my face, you know I'm a senior citizen. But for persons with disability, that's not going to be apparent.
Right.
It's always apparent. But when it's apparent, we give the discount right away. They don't even have to present their card. However, our stand is not for fighting verification. Our stand is, can anyone really tell us to give discounts to fake PWD card holders? That fake PWD card being presented, how can we give discount to a criminal? How can we give discount to such fraud? There's also a tax implication. There's also revenue implication for the cities. So, like Quezon City gave us instructions recently to verify the cards. So that's contradictory to what the DOJ has expressed. So we hope that there's some sort of reconciliation for the DOJ to understand. Our point for verification is to weed out the fake cards, not to deny discounts. Because generally speaking, when in doubt, we still give the discounts. It's when we see obvious fakes or when the PDAO officers or LGU absolutely declare that, hey, that card is a fake, don't give discount to this person, that's when we stop giving the discount.
I just wonder where you got the 2 million figure of the number of PWDs in the country. Is that the official number? We also asked what are the common declarations for PWD. Parang marami raw ay psychological and mental disability. What do you say to that?
The number one that we see is visual. The second is psychosocial. The third is orthopedic. So for visual, you might ask why we have these numbers or figures earlier. No? According to the NCDA, or the National Council for Disability Affairs, they're the ones who told us that it's under 2 million population of the Philippines who are classified as disabled persons. But as you've seen in our own experiences, a table of 10 people, suddenly all of them are disabled people. So it's kind of confusing. You also asked earlier if the government has done anything, like the DSWD Secretary Gatchalian. They've already made the decision to create a unified ID where a hologram and a QR code will be present. That is easy for us to use because we can just now scan the QR code and pretty much determine for ourselves very easily if it's legitimate or not. The other concern, I just heard this recently, where a real person with disability went to their LGU and could not get their PWD card. It was very difficult for them. And somebody approached them and sold them a fake PWD card. And now that's really strange. Now you have a real disabled person forced to use a fake PWD card. That's just crazy now.
It is.
Eric, can you give us the sentiment of restaurants? I know that businesses are shouldering the burden of this discount, and not government, not any other agency, but restaurants themselves. Are restaurants willing to pay for this? Even if we're talking about the legitimate PWD or disabled discounts, are restaurants willing to pay? And can you give us, an idea of how taxes are when you give discounts? Are you getting exemptions of some kind just for government to sort of pay you back for the assistance?
Yeah. Because we also did hear of certain PWDs complaining that, of dodgy computations, and even from like really big quick service chains at that.
Go ahead. Well, how it works is the 20% discount. If it were 100% reimbursable from government, it would be in the form of a tax credit. That's not the case. I'm not a tax expert, and I'm always confused when my accountant explained this to me. But at the end, we pay for more than 75% of that discount out of our pocket. We can deduct less than 25% against our taxes. The other part is government actually loses the VAT because the VAT is removed from the computation. But we, the restaurant owner, because we have input VAT, we now do not have the VAT to claim against from sales to PWD discounts. So it's very confusing. I think we might be the only country in the world where the welfare system is funded by the private sector. And yet when we ask for protection, it's been very difficult, and it took a very long time before government took notice and made some actions, and we welcome that now.
Okay. All right, thank you so much for clearing that out with us.
Clean that up.
And sharing the sentiment of the Restaurant Association. Thank you for joining us tonight, Resto PH President Emeritus Eric Teng.
Whilst he was talking, I had a quick look on FB Marketplace, and he's right. You could easily find lots and lots of ads showing PWD IDs. They'll assist you,
or even
they'll
on like the shopping apps.
And really, that's the platform's culpability, right? That's because that's cyber fraud. That's illegal activity, and I don't know why Facebook hasn't done anything around it.
I think they try to catch, but they just keep like popping up, like mushrooming all over the place.
Right, but they've got the power to shut it down.
It's their problem, right?
Yeah.
Well, hoping that new PWD card will address the situation. I think it goes on pilot test supposedly last month until June.
Hindi na kailangan pala mag-recto, no? Facebook lang.
Oo, shortcut na nga ngayon, ang dali-dali.
Recto still gets a bad rap, but I think there's no more fakers in there.
They've all gone online since the pandemic. No, I'm just joking. But finally, for our big picture tonight, we say a big happy birthday to Facebook. I know, right? 21 years ago today, Mark Zuckerberg and some friends launched the site exclusively for Harvard students. The platform's reach expanded and began including members of other U.S. universities. And the rest, as they say, is history. Fast forward to 2025, and the social networking site has about 3 billion users with an estimated net worth of $1 trillion or 55 trillion pesos. Facebook has since acquired Instagram and has changed its parent name to Meta in 2021. Pero
$1 trillion company, and yet we can't curb fake ads, spam, cyber activity.
And
What
fact
else?
checking.
Cyber fraud pala, cyber fraud.
And fact checking.
checking. I don't know.
And now they're
I don't know that
looking
we're any better
to
off.
loosen up.
Yun yung term na ano eh, tumatanda ng
Content
paurong.
moderation.
Content
yeah.
moderation,
Fact checking.
right? Like the track of X. And I think Mark Zuckerberg might also be heading towards cutting down jobs.
Yeah, which he has
That's right.
been already, right?
That's right.
For a while.
That
Slowly.
part you can't argue, but I mean,
Facebook, you're 21 years old. You're an adult
the
now.
sale of fake PWD IDs, I mean, that's clear as day.
That's illegal.
That's illegal. That should be stamped out of social media, right? But
Here's
what
to
do I know?
hoping that Mark Zuckerberg caught this episode tonight. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. That's it for the big
Puro
story.
negative naman tayo. Hindi tayo mapapanood kung wala tayo sa Facebook.
Totoo
Meron tayong
naman.
Facebook live stream.
Nahawa na siya sa optimism ko.
The good and the bad, we take it all. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.